We've
So
all
if
learned so much.
you don't know, I'm like super casual on my page. So let me pull it up so I can make sure I see us. I guess somebody hears me talking. Okay, let's see. All right, y'all, let's go. It worked. So, so this is April Preyar, criminal defense attorney from Chicago, the Justice Junkie. And normally I do a video on Friday talking about some injustice in the criminal injustice system. And today I am breaking from my traditional format. Y'all know me, I'm usually running around with my phone, doing a little quick video. And this is gonna be a longer video because we're gonna have a much more in-depth conversation with a true expert in his field. So y'all have seen me hyping him up all week long. I was on here joking that he must think I'm his stalker, but I've been all up and down his Facebook page, all up and down his bio, all up and down his website, reading his book, I was like stalking your blog last night. My dad, who's a social worker, has officially stolen your book from me.
Good.
I have to order some more because now I do not have as many to give away because he has broken the, little binding. So with all of that, let me do a formal introduction and tell everybody why I'm so excited. I am monitoring the Facebook page, so y'all can give us a thumbs up, show us some love on there, and of course, watch the replay. If you watch the replay, please hashtag replay so that we know that you saw it later. So I am honored and privileged. The two of us have been like in the same orbit, but not really in the same circle. So it wasn't until recently I started really watching what he's been up to. So who is he? This is Dr. Obari Cartman. And like I've been saying all week, he is a complete phenom. Like he has devoted his entire life to Black men's health. And so what caught my attention or drew my attention back to him is he put up a post saying that he believed that gun violence, specifically in Chicago, we're both Chicagoans, we're both Chicago natives, we both went away for school and came back, and we both love our city and love the people in our city. And he said that he believed that the gun violence among Black youth was a mental health problem. And so that immediately resonated with me. I've been practicing law for 20 years, and in those 20 years, 90% of my clients, maybe even higher, are Black men from ages 17 to 87. That's the oldest client I've ever represented. And the median age is probably 18 through 25. And to be perfectly honest, the criminal justice system ain't got no solutions for them, got no resources for them. And so to see somebody who has created resources. So Dr. Cartman not only is a therapist, not only is a trauma-focused therapist, not only is he a PhD, he went to Hampton University for undergrad, he got his PhD from Georgia State, he went on to be a professor, he also created his own curriculum that I
definitely— Can you do this part without me? It's so weird. Like,
no, not without you. They need to hear this.
Can I go step away?
No, they need to hear this. They need to hear this, and you need to hear this. Because sometimes I think you forget how much of an impact you're making. You're just in it, you're in the trenches, and then you don't hear all of your accolades. So no, you need to sit there and take it. So, but what I love most about your work is that you use any and every medium you can to reach Black men. Whether it's hip hop, whether it's your mixtape on your page that I caught yesterday, whether it's poetry, whether it's writing, whether it's a drum circle, whether it's yoga, it's whatever means necessary to reach brothers and speak to them in a language that they can understand. And that I respect. Instead of having a suit on and being stiff and speaking from a podium, although you can do that as well, you go to where they are, relate to them, and they relate to you. And so with that, I really want to give you a platform to speak, but I do want to read your post that caught my attention. I put it on my page because I wanted people to read it in advance. Also, I did take questions from viewers in advance, and they will win something. So I submitted those questions to you in your inbox. I told you, y'all, I've been stalking him. I've been all on him. I know he like Dang, I said I'd do the interview. Why she keeps sweating me? But this is the quote. So he posted this on July the 24th. Y'all know I have been very against the feds coming here, very against, very vocal, did a very impassioned video about that last week that got a lot of attention. And this is his take on it. So July 24th at 5:06. Overseers of the American experiment won't admit their shortcomings. They don't know how to stop gun violence by Black youth in Chicago. All America knows is bigger guns. Even if we could convince them to view the violence as a mental health problem, they don't have the federal or city expertise to deploy a group of healers that would be effective with Black boys. If they put their elite team of psychologists together, they would come to the city and do more harm. It's frightening, but also motivating. There really is no one coming to save us. We all we got. So I want you to tell me what inspired the post, what encouraged you to say it just like that, and then we're gonna break it down piece by piece.
I mean, it was the news about the feds too coming to the city, and the debate amongst Black people about the utility of armed forces in the neighborhood, because I'm sympathetic to the dual sides of this, where people want to feel safe in their communities, but don't know how to make that happen. The defund the police movement is a really powerful movement. I do think that we need to reallocate resources in ways that are more useful. And I understand what it means to need to call the police when something happens, because there's nobody else to call right now. It was during the week of the like the protests, right after the looting and the riots and the rebellion and all that. During that week, in my family, my sister had an altercation with a guy she was dating. He came, attacked her, was trying to literally just shot her a couple times. And if it was not for the police, my sister would be dead, like real life, right? And so, like, I understand this dilemma we're in, where we have not organized in our community the kind of structures that we can call upon instead of the police. So we're in this gap where we know that they ain't doing it right, but like, who is doing it right? And in the space between, I think that instead of waiting for solutions for the government to figure this out, or for the city to figure this out, I think that we need to use what I'm calling momentum, motivation, to like come together with your block and really have a meeting and say who's in trouble, what do they need, how can we barter, how can we exchange, how can we figure this out. I think that we're smarter than we think we are, and I think we've become too complacent on the conveniences of the system. And I think that this year has been really illuminating for the illusion that the system has presented itself as sufficient enough to handle crises. If you watch the news carefully enough, like it feels like they're making this up as they go along. You can just tell that they really don't know what they're doing. And we're waiting for the scientists, like the top scientists on the world. We're waiting for them to figure out vaccines and healing. And you can tell every time they say something is new and there's conflicting reports, like it's just this mismatch of like need and lack of solution. I think really should point to the community's responsibility to step up in the meantime, so that if we say we don't need the police no more, what that looks like in practice is there's a conflict on the block. The police show up, and we can really be in place and say, no, we got this. Like, we got a group of brothers that have already been deployed, that they in place. They got these two young men. They separated. We've done some counseling. We've done some stir circles. We've done some mediation, and we've already figured this thing out. So then I can say I don't need you no more. Like, we're not there yet. We're not organized enough. And the police are like, well, I'll just stop working and then watch the chaos unfold, just because they are aware that, for the ones that are really interested in stopping, reducing the harm, that they're doing a lot of work to the best of their abilities with their resources to mitigate this chaos that's been created over years and generations with systems and layers and dynamics that is not as simple as I think that we want it to be. And part of the solution has to be us stepping up, engaging more, using our resources, our creativity, and not waiting for nobody else to come in, and not waiting for the grant to get approved, not waiting for the long, like just what do we have right now that we can do to make our children safer is a question that would lend itself to better answers than waiting for somebody else to figure it out. I just think that we need to take more responsibility in this moment.
Okay, we're gonna dig into that, but first I want to know, why is it that you consider gun violence to be a mental health problem?
I mean, I think about violence in general. For the most part, I almost always think about violence as a weak substitute for power.
Hmm.
Even systemic violence. When I think about like the trauma of enslavement for centuries, I don't think about the Europeans that were orchestrating that trauma for us. I don't think about them as powerful. I think about them as weak and pitiful and like pathetic. Like I think about them as like I feel sorry for them almost. You know what I mean? So when I think about someone using violence in a moment, that violence is a quick solution to 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 make up for a feeling of lack of power. And so whether it's a fist or a gun, in that moment, the person feels powerful, but I don't think it's real. I don't think it's a real actual power. It's just an illusion of power. And so because of that, I think about what does it mean to have real power? How do we get young people to feel powerful so they don't have to rely on gun violence or any type of violence unless it's defending themselves, right? And for me, that is a mental, spiritual, physical, like this a person developing, cultivating a sense of power in themselves. And how do you use your mind to say, I am valuable, that I see my community as a part of me, that we are brothers, we are interconnected, that there's a value system and principles of discipline and togetherness and like respect for self and other. Like these are all mental conditions. These the sense that I would not shoot someone unless I had to was put in me through mental conditioning and rewards and punishment. And so if we got young people that don't have that, that are just completely devoid of a sense of power, a sense of self, a sense of community that protects them and each other from violence, then the solution can't be control and dominate. It has to be try to understand them and think about them as full human beings and not just a problem to solve. If you conceive of a problem as the violence means that these are animals or they're savages, and if they claim in themselves to be savages, and then the police and the system and the judges see them as savages, then it narrows the way you can respond to it. If you think about them as human beings, like I do my children, like I do my cousins, which is why it matters who is doing the programs. It matters that it's Black people getting funding to these programs because we have it's easier for us to pivot to see these young men as people and not as a nuisance, not as just like something to fix or get rid of or do away with. Because in the schools or in the streets, if that is the conceptualization, then suspensions or detentions or jail or prison or whatever way that you get rid of a problem is the only way you can think about solving that problem, which means bring the feds in, bring bigger guns in, which means build more prisons, which means pay more judges. You know what I'm saying? The parole, the judicial system makes so much money off of the lack of community response to cultivating young men to be full humans. So all of that, these are all mental problems. These are all mental, spiritual, you know what I'm saying, like soul. This is not a young man problem. This is not something's wrong with them. Like the whole system is broken. The whole thing, and broken sometimes means like it's not operating like it's supposed to. And oftentimes I think that broken is the wrong frame, that it is working exactly as it's been designed, and then we kind of just fall into it. So then the young men fall into it without being aware that they are losing it. And in moments when they use the violence to think they're winning, to feel more powerful, it just sets them up to lose even more. And then these are all conversations that we just need to have over and over again to give them a different sense of perspective, a different sense of value, and to not use the violence as a way to distract themselves from the trauma and the pain and the sadness and the grief and the thoughts of suicide and the lack of worthlessness and all these things that a psychologist would see, but a judge, a police officer, is not even equipped to think about in that way because they see them as the problem. It's the same way if you see like an animal. If you see like a chicken. I got folks from the South, and they used to talk about like the danger of naming the chicken. If you call it Fred, then you have a relationship with Fred. It's a lot harder to kill it when it's time to eat Fred. You know what I'm saying? Like you got to keep a certain distance from a being if you want to treat it a certain way. And so once we started to humanize our boys and see them, like look at their faces and not think about them as criminals or just a problem, then we could develop so much more rich, robust, and useful solutions to this problem. And that the problem not be gun violence, but the problem be we not cultivating good boys. We not pouring in love into them. We not giving them skills to be meaningful and to have joy and to have peace and to have, you know, good relationships and intimacy. That we have failed them, and then we call them a problem, and then we get rid of them. Like that's our problem as adults, not the young problems, not the youth problems being raised in the communities where they're so easily discarded.
Wow. Disposable men.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we so mean. Oh my God, we so mean right now. Like the internet has created this generation, not even just of young people, but like everybody, where we can, you know, the memes and the people will be on a bus, take a picture of a stranger and make fun of them, and it's like we just so callous. We've lost so much empathy, and the young people, they eat it up. Like they are absorbing all of this the cancel culture. A man makes one mistake, and then now he is not worthy of being anymore. And now we like the correlation between the rise in suicide and the rise in cancel culture is something we got to look at. Like we promote this value system that people are disposable and discardable, and that if we don't like what they do, if I disagree, then like cancel them. Like how do you cancel a person? And then why do we think that young people would not mimic that behavior and it turn into violence or it turn into isolation, it turn into suicide? All these things that we struggling with, we create the culture that allows that to happen.
So how do you cultivate good men?
I'm
saying you. Wait, let me be clear. I'm asking how do you? Not I'm asking how we as a community solve the problem. I'm asking how you cultivate good men.
So I was about to start in the wrong place. I was about to say I thought about my children first. I had two boys, 4-year-old and 8-year-old. They're the light of my life. So part of it is just like prioritizing my role as a father and cultivating those two very specific men and creating a world and atmosphere where I pour into them everything that I have. And that being my first priority, my first job. You introduced me as a psychologist or whatever it is. My first job in the world is a father. So the way I do that is focusing on those boys. But that's not the first place, though. The answer to the question really doesn't begin with them. It begins with me. How do I cultivate good men? Is me cultivating me as a good man, and me developing myself and ascending to my highest heights and checking myself and holding myself accountable and constantly being in the process of not being comfortable with where I am, always revising, always editing, always interrogating self, always checking on the community that I'm in and asking for feedback. Like I'm always just in this process of self-development. And because of that, in the work that I do when I'm in conversation with other men, I get to use myself as a tool. And in psychology and counseling, we're trained to do this like blank slate, this very distant, like the Western way of being a counselor is to have real strict boundaries. But Black people don't work like that. When people come into my office, they want to know who I am. They want to know why I'm qualified to have any business in their life. And so I've learned to use myself and be transparent to model the process of self-cultivation, of using the mistakes that I've made, of using my shortcomings, and not positioning myself as like, I figured this out. I'm a perfect man. That's not my platform is not, no, I'm one of the good guys. Because I think that a lot of guys hide behind the good guy posture, and we pander and we say the right things and we hashtag the right hashtags and we post pictures of Brianna or whatever. I mean, we do whatever's trending now that we think makes us look like a good guy. Chance posted a bell hooks post, like whatever we think is the trending way to present ourselves. I think that, you know, the work is much deeper than that. And the work is always having more men be more open about what we're working on and always have something that we're working on. Because as long as we're alive, there's more to learn and there's better to be. And that is how I cultivate good man is like I start with myself. I'm very hard on myself. And sometimes it also means having the balance between being not so hard on myself and being compassionate and being patient, but always being in progress and having my progress be a part of the healing space when I encounter other men. So then when they meet me, they're like, okay, this is a real conversation. This isn't a professional. This isn't someone who has all the answers. It's like we are engaged in the process of trying to figure stuff out and ask hard questions. I do it for myself first, and then I offer you the opportunity to do it. And then together we figure out something. All the books that I read, everything, like I don't have an expertise in men. I have an expertise in self, right? And I'm still developing that. And then that process of me being better gives me the tools to be able to facilitate that for other people. So then that's my expertise. It's not psychology. It's not mental health. My expertise is know thyself and then create opportunities to have other men sharing that.
I actually meant to say that what impressed me about your profile, your bio, is that the very first descriptor you use is father. And that's very telling. You don't start with your accolades. You don't start with your degrees. You don't even start with where you're from. You start by saying that you're a father. But I wanted to read something else from your blog that struck me. And then we'll get into questions of the viewers. Black man, you are not a sorry being. You are not worthless. There is no benefit to having shame for being born Black or male. You have been hurt and you have hurt. In a world that focuses more on the latter, the spotlight is on you right now. Weather the storm. Allow the wind to extract your dirt for new seeds to be planted. When the dark clouds come, go inside. Cry when you need to. Rain is refreshing. Heal so we can fight. Black men have inherited conditions that we did not create, but are responsible to fix. It's not fair. It's not your fault. And it's still true. You have not been properly prepared. I'm asking you to give things you never received, like compassion and patience. I'm asking you to be a less damaging father than your damaged father was. It's a terrible burden. You have to do it while the world has turned its back on you. It's urgent. I wouldn't ask it of you if I didn't know you were one of the most powerful forces on the planet. You are not a mistake. You are too many exquisite details to be a mistake. Nayara Wahid is the last sentence. So that was very powerful. That really caught my attention, even more so than the post that you put up. But I want to talk about the part where you say Black men have inherited conditions that we did not create, but you are responsible to fix. Can you tell me more about that?
So I appreciate the last couple of years focusing on the trauma-informed language. The therapists, mental health educators are using trauma-informed as a lens that I think is really useful. That shifts the question from like what's wrong with the kid to what happened to a kid, and it's a very powerful shift. And the schools and the systems are very set up, have been typically set up to go in to think about what's wrong with the person, and then how can I address that, and not so much what happened to that person. What I think is missing from that shift in the trauma-informed space is a more collective lens where we ask those questions about what happened to us as a people, and think about the trauma not being individual but a collective trauma. And part of the healing, I think, has to be education, just teaching what intergenerational trauma means, teaching what happened to Black people for generations, for 400 years. What are those policies? What are those practices? Because without that information, what I experience is a lot of young people and older people having this sense of shame for being Black, and this feeling that there's something wrong with us. Because if I look at my community, all I see is pain and trauma and brokenness and mean and missing and lack. And without an understanding of the puppeteers that created the conditions that perpetuate that kind of trauma in those communities, who set up the policies to create concentrated poverty, who like, what does it mean to disinvest from a community? Not even leave a community alone, but like to extract. resources. Like without that understanding, it makes sense to me that someone will be left with this sense that it must be my fault and my parents' fault and my grandmother's fault. Like that we must be broken, and now on top of that, we have a mental health movement that brings more professionals to come in to give new diagnoses of individual brokenness without the context of the collective brokenness. And so when I say we inherited conditions, I mean the traumas of enslavement, the traumas of Jim Crow, the traumas of structural racism. Those are the mental health diagnoses, not your individual depression, your individual PTSD, or your individual anxiety. We have to call the system broken or crazy or sick or dysfunctional, and not spend so much time trying to become experts at diagnosing individual responses to the systemic brokenness. And then if the individual responses is only based on analysis that you did something wrong and need to make better decisions or change your thoughts or breathe more deeply or be more mindful, then my individual approach to healing still misses the continuing conditions that are perpetuating trauma that will you're just spinning yourself in circles. You're a hamster on a wheel if you're not looking at the conditions that create the trauma. And I don't think that we're there yet. I think that there's more movement there after George Floyd. There's been more conversation publicly about reparations, about systemic structural racism. A lot of that has not really merged with the mental health movement in ways that I think are important. And so I think the conditions, understanding conditions, looking at history, looking at what happened to us as a community is a part of what a treatment plan is for therapy. And most counselors aren't doing work like that. We go into, tell me what your mama did to you without understanding what happened to your mama's mama that created this brokenness in the lineage, and then how do you repair that? What disconnected you from your cultural healing practices? What disconnected you from your conception of ancestors and spirituality? Like what were the violent means that created the trauma, and not just like who shot your friend, because it's too narrow of a lens, and it perpetuates the sense that you are the problem and not the system itself. So that leaves us to call on the system again. That's why we bring the feds in. That's why we, hold on, I'm in a community center. It's always activity here. So our lens, we need to broaden our lens beyond individual trauma to conditions, to systemic, to intergenerational, and look at the harm befalling upon all of us. And none of us are safe from it. We've all been impacted by it. So that's when I say, like, you've been harmed and you harm. All of that is because we damage folks, and we brilliant folks. Like, all of this happened at the same time. We got the epigenetics are showing ways that trauma is passed down from generation to generation. It's also true that the melanin passes down brilliance and genius from generation to generation. We gotta merge these things, and we have to find ways to cultivate opportunities to pull out the genius and to minimize the impact of the trauma.
I think that you spoke to what's at the heart of the criminal justice system's brokenness is that we don't even address what your mama did to you. Like, there's no space for that. It's only what harm did you perpetuate, and that's it. Not what harm was done to you. Even if we submit mitigation to the judge, it's really something that's glossed over because there's no room for it. And even in terms of what treatment is available, honestly, it's laughable. Whatever mental health treatment is available, if you qualify in the criminal justice system, if you have a formal diagnosis, then perhaps you can get some mental health probation, or you can get some sort of treatment, or they send you off to Elgin or whatever the facility is now. But we're not even talking about one generation removed.
That's right.
We're not talking about the trauma of your neighborhood. We're not talking about the trauma of your lack of education. None of that. There's no room for that in the current legal system. And it's why we're just cogs in the wheel, and why we just keep running through like, we're on a factory. So here are the questions that were submitted. Sorry if y'all submitted questions late. Too bad. You don't get a gift. You should have followed the instructions. So the first one, I'm going to go out of order. So at the very beginning, you kind of started talking about the state of affairs right now, what's on everybody's, in the forefront of everybody's mind, which is COVID. and how COVID has completely changed our lives, how 2020 has been like no other year that really anybody living has lived through.
Yeah.
And so this question comes from, she is a fellow attorney, Lynn Toussaint. Her question is, how would you suggest approaching Black men for treatment? No, I'm sorry. I cut her down twice. I'm going to find Lynn's question and come back to it. But she had a question specifically about COVID. So I'm going to ask another question. Sorry about that, Marie. I will get back to you. This one is from Frederick. It says, my question, how would you suggest approaching Black men for treatment who are addicted to the street lifestyle?
Mm-hmm. I think that there are, one of the things that I think has been most useful in my approach to talking to men that are addicted to street lifestyle is helping them see the ways in which that addiction is not strong, but is weak. That they are not winning, but they're losing. Like reframing that. And so, like, and I've done work in prisons. I have a rites of passage program in juvenile detention program right now. But I've done work in adult prisons too. And it's a fascinating thing to see a sort of like a so-called gang leader in prison, buff, tatted, like still feeling powerful while another man tells him when he can go to sleep, or while another man tells him what to eat, right? So reframing what power really is, and that the system allows a certain mimicry of power that we accept, but it's not real, and that we're actually losing. And when I can point to the winners, then it taps into this competitiveness that men have, where like men don't like that feeling of being like tricked. But I can break it down, like I can show you, like you've been tricked, right? You fell for an okie doke. There's been a plan. You have fallen right into it, and that there's a bunch of men, mostly white men, that are benefiting from your illusion of power, from your illusion of winning, and that once I point that out, once I show the white men that are winning, I'm in JTDC. They don't even know like the name of the white guy in charge of that center itself. They don't know how many people are depending on them being locked up to feed their children. It's real simple. I point it out, like, and I do it with music. I point out the CEOs, the bread companies. I point out, you know what I'm saying, even like the founding fathers. Like all these white men that are currently and historically have won because of your pain and dysfunction and your lack of power, triggers this thing in men that makes it causes a discomfort. Then it gives me some room to move. So now I can say you getting played by white dudes that are eating well off of you, and that you are creating more and more misery for you and your children. Then now we have a different conversation. Now I can say, okay, you're right. I can see that now. What do we do about that? What do we do about that is the beginning of a host of journeys of questions and explorations that beginning can be really important for me for. So just go into their life, look at the things that they say they enjoy, the things that they think are making them whatever quick money they get, or whatever sense of power they get from that, or whatever sense of safety they think that they have from that, and then like just play around with those concepts. And it's real easy. The whole thing falls apart once you like break it down. You're not really safe. You're not really protecting your children. You're not protecting yourself. You're not winning. You're not strong. Like all these things that the street life gives them temporarily, I can give you permanently. I can give you real power. I can give you real joy. I can give you real peace of mind, real safety. It's a different way of being in the world than the way the system designed for you to fall into. Now let's have that conversation. And I start with that. I start with like historical context, with system analysis, with what happened to the people, what white people are doing, how they're still winning. Like those things are atypical for like a therapy session, but I lead my programs, my curriculums with that analysis, and it really shakes them up some.
Thank you, Frederick. You get a book for your question, because I know you already have a game. I already know you were one of the first people to buy a game. So I'm going to give you a book. This is his book, Ladies Man. And I'm going to tell you, it's not what you think. The very first page is a shocker. So I'm going to DM me your address. I know I have it from the game, but send it to me anyway. So this question is actually from Lynn. I had to go look for it. What effect does COVID have on mental health, especially African Americans?
So, I mean, other things we're talking about are just exacerbated by COVID. So, in the ways in which African American communities were already disadvantaged, lack of resource, had poor general mental health. Those are all, COVID just made all of that worse. So the pre-existing condition of racism means that the impact of unemployment, the impact of lack of housing, the impact of like the financial gap, all that is, we're going to see all of that just hit us much harder. We already started to see the numbers, the death rates, the impact of unemployment, all these things that are hitting the country will always hit the Black communities harder because we have a safety net that's weaker. So it just means that we got to do more work. It's always true. It's always, again, it's to the point in the blog. It's not fair. It's just where we are, but we have to do more work to maintain balance and sanity and protect our children and figure out how to educate them without the same access to technology, without the same, you know what I'm saying, formations of homeschooling. While the schools experts are trying to figure it out, we need to not wait for them. We need to come up with, you know, formations on our blocks, in our families, to make sure our children are educated. The impact of COVID on the educational process, as a specific example, is going to impact Black children worse, which means that the adults, the educators, the community net has to become even stronger, which means we have to work together more, we have to collaborate, we have to do all these things much more hard to mitigate the impact of addiction and domestic violence, which is another false power thing, right? Substances. I mean, all these things that we already have problems with, we're just going to see more and more problems in the Black community. We've already seen the numbers of suicide spike in Cook County since COVID. The impact of racism and police brutality and the conversation and the lack of response systemically that's not sort of cosmetic or gestures. It causes just this intense anxiety that everybody's feeling, that we already felt, that we feel with more intensity since COVID. We all got to just be extremely compassionate and soft and gentle with ourselves and with our people, and work harder to support the efforts of people that are interested in creating healing space, whether it's virtual or if it's in small pockets or if it's outside. Like the things that we have relied on, despite all the harm that we've experienced, we now lose those things. So losing funerals, losing the grief, the grieving process. Like, there's rituals inside of our communities that, like, you know, if somebody with a lot of money or with a real resource community has to stay at home and they got their own room and the kids are, you know what I'm saying, on the Xboxes and have access to the internet and like just good Wi-Fi, like real simple things that are happening in communities that had a safety net already, our children will have. And then the resources to then go and repair that damage and to protect them are continuing to be misallocated. And then our solutions are still so simple. Like we still have to do like basic stuff, like make sure that everybody in South Shore, the community I live in, has masks, like basic needs. We still right now, the organization I work for, Real Men Charities, is passing out food, which we do on Friday. You see a lot of people doing food giveaways because the folks that are aware of the impact of COVID are still just surviving. We still, masks, food, and gloves and sanitizers is what most of the people are having to do now. We can't. It doesn't even give us time and space to think about homeschooling yet, or mental health resources yet, or financial resources to housing resources. We still, food and masks is where most of us are still at, and it's a disadvantage that COVID exacerbates over and over again.
When you said be kind to yourself, you reminded me, I have a friend who I've probably used this phrase more than any other phrase in the last year just because of what's happened in my own life. She says, give yourself grace.
Yeah, that's right.
And that we're very quick to give someone else, and her name is Tiffany Lee, and we're very quick to give someone else the benefit of the doubt. We're very quick to say, oh, that person's going through XYZ. But if we're going through something, we're very hard on ourselves. Like you said, you're hard on yourself, that we're very hard on ourselves and very unforgiving, and we don't give ourselves that space. And in the midst of a global pandemic, in the midst of having so many aspects of our lives out of control, it's imperative that we do that. So that was Lynn. You also get a book, ma'am. Counselor, you get a book. You get a book. I'm gonna be like, Oprah, you get a book.
Oprah, right. Everybody looking
Uh-oh.
seats right now.
Huh? Say it again. You were frozen or I was frozen?
I would say everybody look under your seats right now.
And see air. So I'm just going to do one. Well, let's see. So this is a two-part question. I don't know if the first part is for you and the second part is for me, but I'll read it all together. So what are the drawbacks to seeking a concealed carry license? How do we get these young men to not get distracted with gun violence given our current economic climate and insufficient educational system?
I can't respond to the CDL question. I don't know what the drawbacks are of that. So I would say that's your question. And I'm very good at saying I don't know. I'm not one to feel like I got to speak on everything. So I don't know what the drawbacks are of seeking a CDL license. I do want to respond to the question about the distractions for the young men. And what's really sad is that, like, it's not so much a distraction, like it really is their reality, that they really do have to worry about the violence in ways that it's hard to understand until you spend a lot of time with them. But like, they're afraid to get on the bus. We can have good programs, but they can't come to me because they can't cross, you know what I'm saying, block boundaries. We have taken summers away from our children. Like, they can't even do fun stuff. They can't even go outside and play basketball. Like, we have really allowed this chaos to fester in a way that has created a sense of anxiety, which is a real anxiety and trauma for these young men that I wouldn't even call it distraction. I really think that in some ways, you know, some of it's over exaggerated on the news, but in other ways, it is very much of the present real reality for a lot of the young men, particularly the ones that, you know what I'm saying, are in the more disadvantaged communities. And so I don't think that we can go into them and tell them not be distracted and focus on school or focus on healing or focus on breathing or nutrition. We have to first find better systemic, structural community ways to really solve this problem. And again, it's not a mental health, it's not a gun problem itself. It's a human problem. It's a relationship problem. It's a resources problem. And I think that we have to provide a better net, a better system for them. And then after we say, okay, now I've created resources and opportunities and places for you to go and things for you to do, now I can say, don't worry about the guns because I got you. And I got some brothers over here that's going to help police. And I got some sisters over here that's watching the block. And I got, you know what I'm saying, we here, we present, we accounted for. We have to do that first before we go to the young people and say, now don't be distracted by that. So let's focus on something else. But we have not created the environment of safety and opportunity and resources and care for them to allow them to be free of that distraction. So I don't even think we're ready for that yet. Unfortunately, they're still there. They're gonna be there until we do something different, like drastically different.
Okay. So for the first question, Willie, the disadvantage, I mean, I believe in the Second Amendment, but the disadvantage, I have my concealed carry, but the disadvantage is, and I tell young boys this all the time, expect to be treated like a criminal. Yeah. Because when a cop pulls you over, before he pulls you over and he runs your plates and he sees your name, he'll see your driver's license and he'll also see that you have your concealed carry before he ever walks up to the driver's side door. So expect him to believe that you're armed. Remember that we are the 50th state to get on board with having concealed carry, and it's still relatively new here, even though it's about 3 years old. And so they're going to treat you like a criminal. If you're young, black, male, alone in a group, doesn't matter, and they see that you might have a weapon in the car, they're going to treat you just like you know, the drug dealer on the corner who does not have a license. So expect to be nose down on the ground or slammed up against the car. It's sad. It's a sad reality. I have a friend who was like, then when I get my license, I did better out here carrying dirty. I mean, that's just the risk you take. I've had others have absolutely perfect experiences. They say, officer, I'm armed. I have my concealed carry. You have to tell them this because you can catch a case if you don't tell them this. I'm armed, it's on my hip, do not move, do not reach for it. And some cops will just give you a ticket or your warning for whatever the traffic violation was and send you on your way. But you have to be prepared for either one. So the last question from our listener, she actually submitted two, but I'm only gonna read one. This is my girl, Lilia. So Lilia, I'm out of books. I don't know what to tell you. I guess you get a game, which I know you already have, or t-shirts. You tell me which t-shirts you want. Maybe I'll give you one of his t-shirts. You got it. Why don't you show them the t-shirt you got on right now, sir?
This, I ain't got my shirt on. This is
really, powerful. Powerful. And speaking of shirts, I'm gonna show you my shirt. This is my guy. He also knows Lily. I've known him from the
What is that in the Africa? I can't even see it.
I think it's just the design. It's just the colors. And so he goes by King B. I'm not allowed to say his government name. His site is indycity.com. So I will include that in the link. He has some other shirts as well, but I love this one, so I got this. So Lilia's question is, what have you learned about yourself after you wrote the book, Ladies Man?
I've learned a whole lot. This was 5 years ago I wrote that book. And I wrote it at a place where, you know, I'm still in process. And I pray that 10 years from now, I'm a better version of who I am. I'm 40 now. I hope the 50-year-old me is better than the 40-year-old me. Like I pray to always be learning and growing and expanding. And so there were things that, you know, I was still struggling with. I'm honest about it in the book, but describing it, writing about it doesn't fix the problems. It does not address the things you still need to work on. So there's work. So there's work around my relationship with women that I still need to work on. There's work around my discipline and my sense of direction and purpose in life and ways to do the work. Like the way I do the work has been more refined. The programs that I'm doing with the men's circles and the rites of passage and all that kind of stuff was born out of that book being the beginning of a process where I just start to dig more specifically into young Black men and what they need, which meant what do I need, right? And so I've just learned a lot about myself in the process and a lot about the business, right? Just because I attempted to go into it being 100% all Black everything with it. So I had a Black photographer, Black publisher. I self-published it, but like I had a Black printer out in Baltimore printing the books. I was trying to avoid having white hands touch it at any point, which meant like not being on Amazon, which is a terrible business decision. You know what I mean? Like, because people don't. We funny that people would not trust putting their credit card information into my website without the stamp of approval of Amazon. And so there are people like, oh, I didn't find it on Amazon. And that was the end of it. That was the end of their search. And so there's no telling how many people I lose access to by only having the book available in independent Black bookstores, and just having it out of my website. So like I've just learned a lot about just the infrastructure of business that requires some compromise that I initially wasn't comfortable with, that 5 years later I'm starting to become more comfortable with, just because the dilemma is always being right and having a small audience, or thinking that there's a need for more people to have access to the content and using the platforms that are available to people that people are comfortable with, even if that means, you know, sharing some of the cut and not being so strict on my like, there's got to be only Black hands, only Black processes can touch this, because again, we don't have the infrastructure available to widely distribute, and so all the artists, singers, everybody has to deal with this compromise in different ways. And I've just learned for myself the advantages and disadvantages of going about the business in a certain way. I used to be pretty anti-grants, like I didn't want no money from the government, like all that kind of stuff. But then, meanwhile, there's people getting money from the government doing poor work, and so there's always there's a compromise in being a good community worker to being a healer in America and having to play the game but not be consumed by the game. I think everybody has to find their own sort of footing in that and be mindful of the compromise. Like, know you're making a compromise, but do it if it benefits people in certain ways. And everybody's not going to be happy. Like, there's no way to please all the people. Somebody's going to love it, somebody's going to hate it. You just got to stay mindful and stick to what you feel is the right thing to do. And that might change over time. And again, be compassionate and kind and have grace with that change. But all of it is a moving sort of process. So I'm still learning. I changed the book cover because,
I
because
know.
like, it gave me trouble. I thought it was
was
clever.
the book cover, y'all. Can y'all see that?
I thought
That
it
was
was
the book
slick.
cover.
I was like, oh,
With all the women behind them, but see, that's the catch. You got to read page 1. That was the book cover.
And so I learned that a lot of people weren't willing to read page 1. They weren't willing to flip the page over, book over, to realize that, like, there's this idea that some people are stuck that, this is Preyar's guide, and he's so bold that he put all the women that he dated on his book cover, and that was all they needed to know. Like, they didn't do any further investigation, and like, it just, that book sitting on the shelf is easy to walk past. It's easy to, like, to judge a book by cover. It's a real thing. Like, people judge books by covers, and
you judged my game by the cover.
I did.
We just talked about that. How did you decide on this image? I said, because 70% of police officers in America are white and male, and the median age is 39.5, and he looks to be about that. Well, yeah, I've had people say the same thing to me, like, why is that on the cover? Why don't you have a black cop? Because a black cop is not likely to stop you somewhere outside of Chicago.
That's right. So it's all a learning process, and I'm grateful for it all.
Thank you. So I have 2 questions. Well, not question. I need you to promote the 2 events that you have going on this Sunday. Chicagoans get masked up and find ways to still tend to your mental health. So tell them about the 2 events that you have on Sunday, and then I have 1 closing question.
Okay. Well, we have a running men's healing circle. We've been doing it for 2 years. We went online for the last couple months to respond to the pandemic, but we are going back to real life starting this Sunday at 11:30 with a black male yoga. It's led by a brother named Mike Wilson, who does a comedic yoga. So it's like ancient cultural approach to movement and breathing. And it's all men, all black men. And then we do a men's circle where we just, we start with playing some drums. Sometimes I'll play music or put the projector up, play some videos. And then we just have open discussions about what men need and what we're going through and how we can support each other. It's like a support circle for black men. So we're starting that back this Sunday, the yoga at 11:30 and the men's circle at 1 o'clock. And it'll be at the Quarry on the southeast side, 2423 East 75th Street. And we're there every Sunday. It's free, it's open, everybody's welcome.
And wear your mask. Masks are mandatory.
We're going to be outside, masks are mandatory for sure. Being trying to get shut down by the city because the city's going back now. So like, I don't want to.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't even know that many people.
I don't listen to Lori Lightfoot, the liar. So I don't know what she's talking about. Anyway, my last question to you: 2 steps that any one of us could take to support Black men's mental health.
2 steps. I would start by encouraging all of us to listen more carefully to the men in our lives and to not let us get away so easily with short, superficial answers. We are practiced, I am practiced in the posturing of, okay, you could ask me how I'm doing, and my response, without even thinking about it, I'm cool, I'm good, I'm chilling. I have several phrases that will just get the conversation off of me. And I could be on the inside, like just torn up and in need of support, but I won't say it out loud. And so I think that it becomes the community of us. And I got people around me that are paying close enough attention to me to be like, not for real, like, how you doing for real? And then it still might take 3 or 4 times for you to ask me that. And go, okay, yeah, you're right. I do need to talk to Lord. I do need some air, or I need go buy some water, whatever it is. But I think that we need to not settle for just the quick, convenient, comfortable answers from men. And the world of the men is to be more honest and to be more courageous and to step outside of our comfort zones and to be more transparent. I think we are ways from that. And it took me a long time to get to a place where I can be more open and ask for help. And I'm still not completely comfortable with that, even in this work. And so I think if you got men close to you, check on them, like check on them for real. Like really create space to ask them how they really are doing, and let them know that you really want to know the truth. And sometimes it means telling the truth for yourself. I'm like starting with how you doing and being honest about that, and that opening the way for them to be honest. But I think that we need to listen more carefully to men, and be more supportive, and whatever that means. And I don't think that it's going to look the same way as what support looks like for women sometimes. I think that one of the reasons I do so many different types of things is because if I put a flyer out that said, men come talk about your feelings, men won't show up for that, because we different. It don't mean that we don't have feelings. It doesn't mean that women are more emotional. It just means that the way men express it, and the culture of masculinity and how it impacts how we socialize and express emotions sometimes comes out as violence or aggression or distance or isolation or substances, or we use sex or money, all these other things to distract us from pain. But it does not mean that we're not feeling it. Like, we feel very deeply. We get our heart broken, we get disappointed, we are embarrassed. We don't have the language or permission to express the full range of human emotions in the same way that women do. And so sometimes you got to trick us. You know what I'm saying? You got to say, you got to have food, you got to have sports, you got to have whatever it is the hook to get men's attention. And then in that space, be more supportive of the reality that we know everybody's going through it right now. Everybody's sad. Like, you're crazy if you're not sad. Like, you're not depressed right now or a little bit anxious right now. And you're not paying attention. And so we need to just assume that everybody's going through stuff and that you don't know what it is, but we know that everybody needs support in some way. And I know sometimes it's hard to do that because men, we push away, and the current crop of men have not developed in a way, sometimes myself included, that can come off as, I want to say deserving of support, but that's what it feels like. It feels like, you know what I'm saying, we feel like we have so much like shame on us, and we've made so many mistakes that we don't deserve support. We're not worthy of the help. And so the people around us have to like cut through all of these layers to let us know that we, like, inherently as beings, are emotional, are worthy, are deserving, that like these things that we don't carry naturally with us. It takes a lot more work to get into the internal space to allow men to feel safe enough to receive the kind of support that we all need. Like, everybody needs it, but men, we push away and we say hurtful things, and we aren't kind as a crop. We are not kind to women, right? Women don't feel supported by us. I'm asking women to support men. Women don't feel supported by us, right? And so part of it is like, how do we go into the younger men to cultivate the kind of men that have enough awareness and value for women and themselves and humanity, so that we can mutually figure out how to be better to each other, and not be so quick to just discard and cancel and give the boys away to the system and let them be eaten by the wolves. Like, I think we need to have a lot more patience with our young men. Take responsibility for the ways in which we let them loose to the corporations that are putting the music in their head, and loose to the justice system, and loose to the schools. And then when they turn 17, they say some off the wall comments about women, and like, it's, everybody's responsible for all of it. And because of that, I think we need to just pay close attention, be more compassionate, and really solve the real problems, and like take the ownership over each other as ours, as a community, as a village, even when we're wrong. And it's hard to do because women have been hurt, right? And so, like, y'all bump it up to your own sort of traumas and trying to connect with us and support us. So we just need more and more space to have these open, honest conversations, and to look towards a vision for a community that's true healing, that's truly connecting to each other, not waiting for the government or the mayor or whoever else to figure it out, and do that work. And it's work. It's hard. It's tedious. It's not going to happen overnight, but it won't happen if we don't do it.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much. You definitely delivered. If nothing else, I want people to know what you're up to and that there is somebody who is a warrior who's fighting for them every day in a different way than what I'm doing. And this is his book. I will post the link, so don't worry about that. And you'll be able to get that. And then also his t-shirt that I featured on the page a few times saying men cry, men forgive. He also sells that in his store. So I want you all to definitely snatch that up, buy some of his shirts, buy some of his books, support the different events that he's doing because he's doing it all as a mission. This is a ministry.
For
Like
sure.
he's pouring into Black men daily. And so we got to support those that do this work. So with that, thank you for joining us for Freedom Friday. Peace.
Please, thank you.
Stop. I don't know how to stop.